All right, I think that's all for housekeeping. Thanks everybody for joining us today. You're here for Sales Intel and Co-Video, and we're going to be presenting on how to sell without sounding like a sales pitch. Of course, very important for anybody that's in the market and trying to figure out how to convert. You have with you today, my name is Jason Hubbard. I'm Vice President of Partnerships and Alliances here at Sales Intel, and then excited to have you with us, Margaret.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much for letting me join you. Yeah, my name's Margaret Henney. I'm the Director of Marketing at Co-Video. If you're not familiar with Co-Video, we are a video messaging platform that lets salespeople record, send, and track personalized video messages through email, your CRM, marketing automation platforms.
Awesome, awesome. You guys are one of my favorite partners to work with because we also use each other's products. So we
Right.
anytime that we're eating our own dog food and talking about how we actually do things and use things, it always makes for a better presentation and partnership. So quick agenda items today. So we're going to start off about how do you cut through the automation. What do you do to be more effective at being able to do your outreach? Talk a little bit about how to be human again, how to create those genuine connections and build trust as you're doing your outreach. And then the next up, we'll talk about how to get your base questions answered before the meeting so that you can focus on actually building that relationship and getting to a deeper level with the conversation. And the last step is going to be using the right tools to get the competitive edge. So with that in mind, I'm going to start really quickly and just sort of lay the groundwork as far as where are things within the marketplace when it comes to sales and marketing, especially in the B2B space right now. Not to belabor the point, but everybody knows that it's been a crazy year and a lot of stuff has been turned upside down. There's been a lot of change going on here. And the graph that you have here, this comes from HubSpot, does a really good job of encapsulating kind of what happened last year as everything started to hit. So you had COVID hit, all kinds of change, all kinds of uncertainty. People worried about pipelines. How are they going to keep this full? How are they going to hit their revenue targets with all this disruption, especially for people that had any exposure to, in-person events or in-person sales meetings being a big driver of their pipeline. Of course, those were for the most part taken away for people. And what you see in this graph is pretty much everybody's answer to this was, hey, let's double down on activity. So you can see from this, activity levels, they're talking specifically about emails, but I've also seen similar studies with outreach on LinkedIn, phone calls, you name it. All outbound communication channels went through the roof. So in this case, over the course of last year, month to month, you're seeing, call it an average of about 75% increase in volume. What is going to happen whenever you have that type of increase in volume? Well, the line graph underneath it is the response rates you're getting out of those emails. And again, similar story for whatever channels you're using, whether that be phone, social, email, whatever. As that volume goes up, you're creating more noise in the system. It makes it harder to break through, to get noticed, and to get the responses that you want. And so hopefully everybody's answer isn't to double down again on activity, because obviously we're just digging a hole as we do this. So what is the answer then? And that's what we're going to be spending most of this time talking about is what do you do in this scenario? And I've said this a lot in the last year. When it comes to how you should be doing your outreach, whether it's sales or marketing, no matter what your channel is, the rules and the best practices haven't really changed. What has changed is it's become a whole lot less forgiving if you're not doing those things that we all know we need to be doing, which is taking the time to segment, to personalize, to customize your messaging, to be human. And so that's what we're going to spend most of this time talking about. Before we jump into the how do you do that, we're going to talk really quickly about how do you do this effectively and how do you do it at scale. So some tricks of the trade here are you can really start your customization, your personalization, and you can do it in a tiered approach. So you can start really high level at the account level and do things like segment based off of technographic information. What's their technology stack or technology footprint? Firmographic data. So where's the company located? What's their size? What's their industry? And so you can start coming up with customization that's really broad, but really easy for you to bucket these and do this in a really quick and efficient, effective manner. And then you can work down into things like intent, or, is the company showing intent against specific topics, specific pain points, potentially intent all the way down to the individual persona level. What's going on at that company specifically? Have they raised a round? Have they had an acquisition? Have they released a press release? And then all the way down into that super, super personalized research of, hey, what do I know specifically about that person? How can I reach out to them? Do we have a connection in common? Did we go to the same school? Are we from the same hometown? That type of stuff. Did they just change jobs, get a promotion, and all of those things? And so you can really work your way down. And a good key to this is the level of your outreach. So if this is pure cold outreach, you're trying to do just at the very top of the funnel, then obviously you want to be really efficient with your time. And so this would be a scenario where you may want to limit yourself to those broad company, industry, firmographic type filters. And then as you get further into that conversation qualification, then it makes more sense to spend more of that time actually doing that research at an individual level. Margaret, I know this is stuff that you guys do and preach all day long, but you want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you're taking the words right out of my mouth in terms of like, my heart goes out to the people who really ramped up their activity when the pandemic hit, because when we're in crisis mode, we just want to do something, right? But it's not exactly how much of what we're doing. It's, of course, the quality of what we're doing, and taking a breath to say, hey, am I doing it in the right ways? And this is the right way, right? Where we're working the funnel from top to bottom, and you're starting broad. Of course, it's going to depend, what your industry is, how broad that needs to be. But that's exactly what we do. We create those buckets for minor customizations and personalizations. And as you start to qualify people and work them down the funnel, you can get more personalized and more tuned in. And like, you go from casting a net, fishing with a net, to fishing with like spear fishing, basically.
Perfect. So I'm gonna hand the next few of these over to you to run point on, and then we'll we'll open it up for conversation around that. But talk to us about this concept of people buying from people they like.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what I call my one truth about sales. So since we're kind of talking about like getting back to basics, what we know about it and doing the right things, we want to make sure when we are hustling and trying to do a lot, sometimes we can fall out of this and forget that this is really the straightforward truth. It's people buy from people that they like and people that they trust. And that sounds really simplified, but we'll take a second to break it down. So if you want to go to the next slide for me, Jason. So the first thing that I want you guys to remember, people buy from people. So the more you can humanize your sales pitch and your outreach to people, the better, right? Because they want to know that there is a real person on the other side of this. Thinking that it's a robot or a computer or an automation, well, there's not a lot, not a lot to connect with that. So the best salespeople that I work with are the ones that don't divorce themselves from the conversations. They bring themselves to that. So the other thing is tell a story. I've had this saying that I remind myself of all the time. It's so true. Facts and figures tell, stories sell. And it's why things like case studies and testimonials are so much more effective than just data points on their own. I mean, that's just human nature, right? That's how we pass along information. We've done it since the beginning of time. We're storytellers. That's how we understand things, is in context. So make sure that you are contextualizing that and building that story when you're reaching out to people. The other thing is personalization, and it's not just a buzzword. I know that people talk about it a lot, but it really is so important to personalize it, because then people know that you're listening to them and not providing just an out of the box solution, right? all the catchy subject lines in the world and fancy automation can't make up for you saying someone's name to them seeing your face and hearing your voice and knowing that you understand the problem or opportunity that they're facing, right? So the more personalized you can be with that, of course, the better. And there's levels to this, right? That's why we talk about those buckets, because you might think about the idea of personalizing something to all of your leads might not be possible when we're talking about top of the funnel. That's when we create those buckets and work people through that funnel and then get more and more narrow on our focus. So,
Yep.
go ahead. I'm sorry, Jason. I'm just
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I was gonna say, I mean, what I've seen is, one, people have gotten a whole lot more cognizant and aware of, the little signals that say, hey, this has been automated or
mhm.
this wasn't personalized, stuff like that. The flip side of it, so a lot of people are like, oh crap, now I've got to do everything manually by
Yeah.
hand. But the other side of it is it's actually a huge opportunity, and I think it goes hand in hand. So one, you've got all of this volume largely driven by automation. So when you do take that time to stand out, you do stand out more. The other piece of it, and I'd be interested to hear your guys' experience or thoughts on it, especially on the video side of things, is so many of us have wound up isolated working alone from home that
Mhm.
those personal human touches, whether it's a video, whether it's customization, whether it's taking the time to do your research and actually talk directly to that person, uh, those actually are so much more effective now than what they were a year ago, at least in my anecdotal experience. And like I said, would love to hear your guys' thoughts around that.
Yeah, bingo. Not just anecdotal, too. We've noticed that since the beginning of the pandemic, engagement with co-videos has increased 40%. So just the number of videos being watched and being watched over and over has increased so drastically because people are starved for that human contact that we can't replicate in just a standard email or a voicemail that looks like every other one that you're getting from people. You want to have that connection. That's just how we're built as people. So your instincts are correct.
Yeah, and I've seen that play out in studies on the phone call side of it. So it's become harder to get people on the phone, both because of volume of outreach as well as people are no longer at their desk, so it can be tricky trying to figure out what phone number to get them on. But the flip side of that is if you can get them on the phone,
Mhm.
people have had higher success rates in converting them to a meeting, which again I think speaks to that that real need for that personal touch and communication side of things. And so if you can insert that into what you're doing, it's particularly effective right now, given what so many of us are facing and dealing with.
You got it. I mean, it's just going the extra mile and doing something to differentiate yourself. So, one of the tools, just so I don't leave that out, is of course using video whenever you possibly can. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit more generic if you're in those higher buckets. Sometimes it's going to be super personalized where I'm saying the person's name, and those are really, really effective. When someone can put a face with a name and know that someone's on the other side and they know their situation and care about it.
Yep, yep. So I mean, this next one, for a lot of people is going to go without saying,
Sure.
but people buy from people that they like.
Yeah, it's kind of like a duh statement, but like I have to always sometimes you have to bring it up, right? Because I mean, I think you've probably had this experience as well. I've never bought something from someone that I dislike when I can get the same thing or even something slightly worse or more expensive from someone that I do like. So it really just goes to show that it's about the people, not always just about the product, right? I mean, it has to be something that there's a need for, right? There's got to be something that you're helping them do. But when there's lots of options out there and very few differentiators, you are your biggest differentiator. So you got to keep that in mind. And when I say likable, I don't necessarily mean like funny or charismatic or all the things that we kind of associate with a traditional salesperson. The biggest thing that you can do is just create space for a real and genuine connection. That sounds a little woo-wooey, but I'm telling you, it will help you speed up your sales cycle like crazy, because when you do that, you can cut through some of the BS and just get down to it, right? Rather than doing this weird like sales mating dance that we're always doing, where like we all hold our cards, hold to our close to our chest, like people aren't showing hey, maybe I'll tell you this, maybe I won't. Like, it's just not the way things are done anymore, or certainly not the way they should be. So when people then say, okay, well, how do I make myself open, or create a space for a genuine connection? The things that I like to remind people is perfectionism isn't real, and there's nothing relatable about it. So it's kind of the reason why we love to hate celebrities that feel perfect. Like, those people get under our skin, versus the people who are like Jennifer Lawrence falling up the stairs to the Oscars, because we see ourselves in that. So just reminding ourselves that perfectionism isn't doing us any favors.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Coming off of the Super Bowl, my wife is a huge Patriots fan, much to my chagrin. So she loved seeing the Super Bowl result, and then when I'm right there with you. I'm on the other side. I'm rooting against whoever it is. But people ask, like, what's your deal? Why don't you like Tom Brady? And it's exactly what you're talking about. He's so damn perfect.
He's got a perfect chin. He throws a perfect spiral, and you're just like, man, I like a little bit of grit. Come on, man. So you're right. He's too good to be liked. And it's true, right? People can't relate to that. They don't see themselves in it. It feels uncomfortable. The next point too, and people may fight me on this. This is, hot take. I feel like professionalism is totally overrated. Now we can take that too far, right? But the kind of professionalism that I'm talking about is like that real stale, stiff sort of thing that is like, well, hello, Mr. Hubbard. I mean, like, no one does that anymore. And it feels weird because it creates actually this armor for ourselves. And when we come to the table with armor for our clients, our prospects, our leads, guess what? They mirror that and do the same. And they're like, all right, I'm going to armor up too. I'm not going to show you who I am or my cards, right? But when we can be real and genuine and flawed, it invites them to do the same.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the key to it is now more than ever, it's about relationships. And you can't build a relationship if you're not vulnerable, if you're not being, an authentic you. And you're hiding behind this facade. And like I said, more than ever, I really do think it's really boiling down to building those relationships. And you got to take down that guard and that barrier in order to do that.
Yeah. And it's not just like, again, I say this, and I think maybe some people might think that that's a little woo-wooey, but if we're doing this, like I said, this sales mating dance sort of thing where we keep feeling each other out, your sales cycle goes from this to this when you're doing that, right? You're dancing all around it instead of just saying like, hey, let's be honest, let's be open, let's be transparent. And then you can get down to, hey, does it make sense for us to even continue this conversation? If that's a yes, amazing. If it's a no, also great, because that means I can clear that person out of my pipeline and move on to someone who is a good fit.
So one of your bullets on the last one and this one are tools. Obviously video is a huge tool for being able to do this, but other recommendations as far as tooling that you need to be able to do this effectively.
Totally. I won't continue to hammer home the video thing, even though it's important, of course, but you don't even have to spend money to do this. One of my biggest things is getting active on social media, especially LinkedIn, and bringing your true authentic self there, right? Posting things, commenting, tagging people, sharing stuff with people. And actually the most effective thing that you can do on social media, one of the things I found is video, but not like fancy marketing videos, which kills me being a director of marketing. The best videos you can do are those like kind of raw stripped down selfies of you holding up your camera while you're talking and just saying like, hey, here's a mistake that I made today. I want my community to learn from this. Or like, here's a win that I had. Like, I want to share some of my pro tips. Those get by far the most engagement of anything on social media.
Absolutely. And I mean, talking about not having to pay anything for tooling and stuff like that, one of the
Yeah.
most effective things you can do, which is dead simple and absolutely free, go set up Google alerts for your primary accounts or your primary
Yes.
people you're trying to sell to. Like, see when they're coming up in the news, where they have something that that's landed out there. Really, really simple, really easy to do, absolutely free. And of course, there's advanced ones that'll plug into and dig through, like social media and stuff like that. But it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be expensive. So
Exactly. And shout them out, right? Send them an email or shout them out on social media. It's a great way to, kind of uh, let them know that you see them and their work, and everybody loves to be praised for that, right?
absolutely, absolutely. All
Cool.
right.
My next one here, my last one is people buy from people that they trust. So, okay, humanization, good. Personalization, good. Storytelling, good. All that great. But all that is for nothing if we can't back it up, right? We've got all this ingredients, but trust is where the ball of dough is starting to form, right? It's starting to make something. So this is where your knowledge, your experience, your stick to itiveness, all of that stuff that you really bring to it is, what lets them know, that you're someone that they want to do business with. And there's a couple ways that we can do this actually. And the funny thing is, I actually picked this up from a great sales coach that I had. And so this comes from him. His name is Brian Neal, by the way, from Blind Zebra, does a great job. So the first one is expert persona. So when I say expert persona, when someone comes to you, whether they're going to buy something or maybe whatever, they expect you to be the expert in whatever you're doing. So own that, right? Don't be shy about that. They're looking to you to be a consultant. Now, of course, we have to do our work up front and learn about them. Like, hey, what's going on? What's your situation? What's the need? And really like dig into it by asking great questions. But then when one of the things that I fall prey to a lot is as a woman and as a Midwesterner, sometimes I use language like, well, like maybe or just or what might work, which is weak language, right? Like stay away from that. You want to say stuff like, one of my favorite phrases is here's what. So I'll say, here's what I heard you say. Here's what I suggest. And here's what our next steps should be. Now they still get to make the call on that and say yay or nay, but I'm letting them know that I know what I'm talking about and I'm being forthcoming with that. And people love that, right? Like they have too many decisions that they need to make in their own life. They don't want to make another one. They're like, I'm coming to you as the expert to tell me what we should be doing. So owning that.
Absolutely.
And the balanced language for this one is more just about openness, transparency, being realistic with what you're saying, not talking in hyperbole, not over promising, and then also having hard conversations. This is something that can feel a little bit counter to what we want, right? Like when I was in sales, I'm a very excitable person. So if I was in an early conversation with someone and they were like, yes, sounds good. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. This is exactly what we need. I'd be like, let's go, roll, right? No stopping. But then after a while, I learned the best thing to do is put on the brakes and say, actually, you're excited. I'm excited, but let's take a beat and see what could possibly get in our way, right? What could be a roadblock? This builds trust because it lets them know that you have their best interests at heart and also gives you the opportunity to combat those challenges while you've got them on the phone or in the meeting because, you know, truth be told, they're going to come up at some point or another. But worst case scenario, they come up when you're not talking to them and somebody else gives them the answers.
Yeah, I mean it's the classic. Every time that you hear a new study, there's more decision makers that are at the table, and
Yeah.
so the person that you're talking to that is super excited is very unlikely to be the only one making that decision. And so you can't count on that, that excitement being consistent across everybody else, or somebody else not putting the brakes on it, where you have an opportunity to try and get out ahead of it, and then now it's out of your hand, or it's a part of a conversation you're not even privy about.
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, and it's your job to lead them to the right answer, right? Even if that right answer is a no, that's what we're trying to get to and get there as quickly as possible. One of the tools that I use for that, actually, again, it's something that doesn't have to really cost you money. It's having a give before an ask for people. So we're always asking for someone's time or their opinion or, whatever, but you can really build trust by sending something as simple as like a case study, best practices, maybe news articles or tips. Hey, did you see that this is going on in your industry? This is something to look out for, something that they can implement and find value in right away. And they're like, oh, damn, Margaret knows what she's talking about. And she's not afraid to share it. That's awesome. I trust her.
Yeah, and what you're tapping into when you do that, a lot of people don't realize is reciprocity, which is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely one of the most fundamental things about how human relationships and societies work. Is you give something to somebody, they have a very, very strong tendency to want to reciprocate whatever that is. It's the
Yep.
reason why, if you've ever wondered why waiters give you a mint whenever they drop off your check, it is shown definitively to increase your tips.
No
Uh,
kidding.
Absolutely, because you are giving them something before you ask for payment.
I never thought
Um,
about that. That's
same
awesome.
reason, same reason why pharmaceutical reps leave pens at a doctor's office. Like there is no significant value to that pen, but it is enough to trigger that reciprocity in the physician, and it does affect prescribing decisions.
That's so
Um,
funny. My alma mater butler is always sending me the return labels for mailing that has like little, like my name and stuff on it. And I'm like, they got me again. I'm giving to them again.
Yep. So absolutely. I mean, that is a fundamental, aspect of human psychology you're tapping into whenever you do that. And it doesn't have to be so manipulative. Like you can actually
No,
be giving them something valuable, but that
exactly.
is at the end of the day the type of thing that you're tapping into whenever you do that.
Yep. You got it.
Well, cool. We're running up to the end of our time, which is great because we're to the Q&A part. Looks like we have a question already in here,
Okay.
but please go ahead and drop those in for us as you have any. Aldous is asking any recommendations regarding a pay-per-lead program to get leads further down the funnel and success rates. Uh, so I'll take a very high level pass at this, which is is going to be a little bit of a punt, which is it depends. It depends on your product, on your sales cycle, on what type of channels that you have. What I'll tell you is a pay per lead program like that. So oftentimes people are thinking about like an outsourced SDR type firm or something like that, where you
Mm.
pay somebody to generate leads or set appointments for you. The two keys to success around that you've got to pay attention to is one, do your research, make sure that they have a good proven track record of successful partnerships with companies, especially if they have success with similar products or offerings to what you have, because that's going to minimize the learning curve on their side. And the other is do your work to try and figure out and make sure that your incentives are in line with each other. Because what you see oftentimes play out with this is, an incentive structure where basically they're incentivized oftentimes based off of number of leads they generate or number of meetings they book or something like that. And the problem is then, they're not looking or required to do the same type of qualification that you would do internally. And so a lot of times those leads or those meetings that are being booked are not as qualified or high quality as what you would be doing internally. That's not to say that's the case across the board, but it's something to pay attention to and make sure that you've done everything that you can to make sure that those incentives are aligned with each other so that they're not just generating and throwing a whole lot more noise into the system that you've got to then go and do all this additional qualification stuff around. Thoughts on your side, Margaret?
No, hey, you really nailed it there. Actually, I hate to, I don't have a whole lot to contribute on that. I think you answered that very well.
Cool, cool. All right. Any other questions? We're a few minutes over, but like I said, happy to hang around as long as people have questions for either one of us. Also, like I mentioned at the start, we will be sending an email with a link to the recap out tomorrow. So we'll have a link to both the recording and the deck. If you guys have any questions or anything that occurs to you in the interim, you can reply to that email and get back to myself or Margaret. We're happy to play air traffic control if you have additional questions around, Sales Intel's B2B data and how we can help you do customization and segmentation at scale, as well as Code Video and their ability to be able to do, video messaging and a lot of this personalization stuff that we've talked about. Um, all right, cool. Looks like we got one other one saying, is there a way to personalize an email campaign? All kinds of ways to personalize an email campaign. One, and let you speak to this, you can absolutely drop video into your email campaign. So super effective channel for being able to share that. But I mean, it can be all the way from your subject line to the content, the copy you have, to the type of content and collateral that you share with it. So, classic example would be, hey, I'm going to segment my outreach based off of industry. And since I'm doing it based off of industry, I'm going to put something in the subject line that's going to indicate that I know what industry you're in, that I'm speaking to. I'm going to have copy that speaks directly to pain points specific to your industry. And hey, I may drop in a case study or something like that where, hey, here are successes we've had with a company similar to yours or in a similar space to yours. So as many ways as you can think of to customize emails. Same for you really across all of your channels. But I think one of the biggest lessons out of that is if you're going to take the time to personalize and customize and stuff like that, make it really, really apparent that you did it. So put it in your subject line because only a certain percentage are going to open that email. So if you bury it in the copy of that email, then you're going to have a huge number of those don't even get an opportunity to see, like, hey, you actually did your time to take, to actually do your research and customize this. So make it front and center, make it, really clear that you've done this.
Yeah, and use the language that makes sense for whatever that audience is, right? Like to say prospects instead of leads or customers instead of clients. I mean, that's a really generic example, but whatever the lingo is, get familiar with it, because then that clues them in to know that you've done your homework and know what you're talking about as well. So it can be as granular as that. It really depends, like kind of Jason said, how large your audience is. So you might have to start a little bit more generic and then get more and more specific, but you can, go down to exactly like you said, where I would record a video and say, hey, Jason, Margaret here, wanted to follow up and, tell you I loved your webinar, or, whatever. It can get that granular, and those have high success rates. Much more work on that end, right? So again, depends how big of an audience you're working with. But I like to segment people, even if I'm not doing it by, once I do it by industry or title or whatever that might be, I also might bucket it into things like my big fish, right? So I've got a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Well, for my tier 1 that's really important to me, that feels like a great fit, I'm going to take the time to do the extra work and do the personalization for those.
Great.
Oh, sorry. I saw this other question. So I was like, I can take this one. Does video content get a lot of bounce backs from target network? That's a really good question. It depends how you're sending your video, right? So if you're trying to attach a video file, you're going to run into some problems because it's a massive, massive file and probably won't go through it all, or will get targeted by spam. So the best thing that you can do is use a service like CoVideo, or host your videos somewhere where you can include the link. So it's not the video file itself. They'll see your name and face in there. When you use something like CoVideo, they click on it and it'll open up a new tab in their browser where that message will play back, so you don't run into any of those issues with being flagged by spam.
Great advice. All right, we got another one. After connecting with someone on LinkedIn, would you recommend sending a video to kind of introduce yourself?
Totally. Yes, I do this all the time, and I do it through LinkedIn as well. In fact, one of my favorite things that I do. So if I'm trying to reach out to somebody, I'll send them an email. Let's say maybe they don't open it, don't respond to it. I'll ping them with the very same video and message in LinkedIn and say something like, hey, I know how crowded inboxes can be. So I thought I'd hit you up here and see if it's a little bit less noisy. Check out this video I made for you. Have had incredible success with that because it's targeted and it really is less noisy for them, and so much more personal.
That's great. I mean, that, and also happened to respond to the next question that came up, which was, if you've sent a personalized email, if you've taken the time to do a video and they've not replied to you, what can you do to double down on that work that you've already done without looking like you're just pestering them or recycling the same thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, don't give up, right? I mean, like if you have someone that you want to go on a date with and they say like, I don't know, maybe later, like you don't just not go back and ask them out again, right? Like you ask them again. So a way to do that and take that same work, like Jason said, that you've already used, I won't even record a new video. I'll take the very same video that I sent him before and say, hey, I sent this over to you last week. I'm sure you're busy. Inboxes are crowded. Thought I'd share it here. Let me know what you think. That's a great way to do it. And also, you need to diversify, right? Not every single outreach needs to be email and certainly doesn't need to be video, right? Plain text email, video emails, phone calls, messages on social media. I know it feels like I'm asking you to do a lot, and it's because it takes a lot these days, right? There's a lot of ways to get in touch with people.
Yeah, and I mean, absolutely. The multi-channel piece of it again is more important than ever. I mean,
Yep.
pre-COVID, there were all kinds of stats. If you add, 2 additional channels to your outreach, typically you're going to see a 3 to 4 times lift in engagement and response rates. That's just become even more important in a post-COVID world. And the lesson that I tell people all the time with it is, even if you're seeing a particular channel seems to be your primary channel that you're getting engagement and responses on, that does not mean neglect those other channels.
Yep.
Because what they are seeing, the outreach they're seeing on those other channels, stuff like that, reinforces what you're doing on that primary channel. And then the other big piece of it is, and I see people guilty of this all the time. I mean, we all are, including myself, which is taking anecdotes and turning them into rules of thumb. Just because we all have confirmation bias. We're like, hey, we saw 3 people reply to an email. Now email's the only thing that I need to do for outreach.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually reliable or statistically significant or something like that. So be wary of those things, be aware of it, and and keep in mind, just because you've seen a few successes in one place does not mean that that's something that is that you can take home and take to the bank, and now you can neglect all these other channels.
Case study of one, right? When you do that,
Exactly.
it doesn't really have a whole lot of oomph to it. Exactly. And even sometimes this one feels really uncomfortable because we like to think that we know a lot and we're the authority on things. But even if you're like, well, I wouldn't respond to that, maybe somebody else would. Everybody's different, right? So try different things. I know some people feel like calling is dead. I don't think that it is at all. But you have to back it up with other activities. I love to call and leave somebody a voicemail. Odds are good they're not going to answer my call, but I am going to leave a voicemail. Otherwise, that activity is for absolutely nothing. And then I send a follow-up video and I say, hey, I just left you a voicemail, but I wanted to put a face with a name and let you know who's in your inbox right now. This is why I'm reaching out.
And that's a crucial piece to it. As you're doing outreach with those other channels, reference the other channels that you've done so that you're bridging that gap. And they're uniting that identity. So instead of it being like 4 Margarets, there's LinkedIn Margaret, there's email Margaret, there's phone call Margaret. It's now it's all Margaret from CoVideo.
Yeah, connect the dots for them. Don't make them do the work.
Absolutely. Well, cool. I don't see any other questions coming in, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up. But Margaret, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for
It
joining
was
us
fun.
today, and thanks everybody for joining us. Like I said, we'll send out the recap tomorrow with a link to the recording and the deck. Both mine and Margaret's information is at the end of the deck, so feel free to reach out to either one of us directly if you need anything, or you can reply to that email with the recap as well. All right. Thank you so much, Margaret. Thanks
Thanks,
everybody for
Jason.
joining us
Thanks,
today.
everybody. Have a
All
good
right.
one.